The main properties of public key crypto systems are that the encryption and decryption keys are different. Systems have different characteristics depending on how they are used. There is no exchange of secret keys, and only the public key is made available to other entities. Therefore, anyone with a public key can encrypt data and send to a recipient. The private key holder is the only entity able to decrypt a message that has been encrypted with the corresponding public key. An entity that wants to receive a message protected by a public key crypto system needs to publish the corresponding public key. The key pairs are generated using one-way functions that are easy to compute yet hard to reverse. These functions are provided by the factorization of private numbers and elliptic curve mathematics. The main problem for crypto systems is preventing a recipient's public key being substituted by an attacker. Therefore, the public keys in a public key crypto system are themselves digitally signed by a certification authority to produce certificates. Certificates are described later in this topic. There are a variety of asymmetric algorithms available. However, the dominant algorithm is undoubtedly RSA, which stands for Ron Rivest, Aldous Shamir, and Leonard Alderman, the inventors of the algorithm. Symmetric cryptography is quick in comparison to asymmetric cryptography. Hence, asymmetric ciphers are used for encrypting and decrypting small items of information, such as symmetric keys and message digests. Symmetric ciphers are then used to encrypt large data items. Digital signatures combine the use of asymmetric ciphers and hashing functions. A digital signature is basically an encrypted hash. The processing is as follows. The sender generates a message they wish to have digitally signed. The sender passes the message through a hashing function to generate a message digest. The system takes the resulting hash and, using the private key, encrypts the hash using an asymmetric algorithm. The result is a digital signature. The sender sends the message plus the digital signature to the recipient. On receipt, the recipient takes the digital signature and, using the sender's public key, decrypts it. This results in determining the hash of the message just received. The recipient takes the message and, using the hashing function, produces a hash. Then the recipient compares the received hash with the hash they have just calculated. If the hashes are the same, then the recipient knows that only the correct sender could have originated and sent the message. Digital signatures can also provide integrity protection from unauthorized message modification or manipulation, and also prove and authenticate message origin. As the sender has sole custody of the private key relating to the digital signature, it is very difficult for the sender to deny they sent the message. This is non-repudiation. Only one entity, the holder of the private key, can digitally sign the message digest, while many recipients can verify it. Public keys require protection and hence are usually contained within a certificate. This protection is to provide integrity of the certificate and to detect any attempt at substitution. A certificate is basically a digitally signed public key. We will cover certificates and public key infrastructures on the next slide. Certificates are digital documents attesting to the binding of a public key to an individual or other entity. They allow verification of the claim that a given public key does in fact belong to a given individual. Certificates help prevent someone from using a phony public key to impersonate someone else. In the simplest form, certificates contain a public key and a name. Commonly, a certificate also contains an expiration date, the name of the certifying authority that issued the certificate, a serial number, and perhaps some other specific information. Most importantly, it contains the digital signature of the certificate issuer. We will cover certificate issuers, usually referred to as certificate authorities, shortly. So why certificates? You want to maintain integrity and non-repudiation of signed documents, and hence cannot trust a simple public key. You cannot trust a simple public key because it is trivial to forge. You just need to generate another key pair. And you need to tie the key and identity together. You need to be able to establish that the entity that actually owns the public key. Therefore, we need the protection of a public key being certified by a known and trusted entity with a binding between the public key and its owner. This is the basic concept behind a public key infrastructure, a PKI. This slide shows a simple example of how a certificate is produced. The user, more formally known as the end entity, generates a key pair and sends the public key with information about themselves as an entity. The information sent includes identity information, for instance the name and email address. This information is sent to a third-party authority who checks the attached information and signs the public key, generating a certificate. The certificate authority uses their own private key. The official name for this kind of signing authority is simply a certificate authority, a CA. The certificate is then returned to the user and is available for a variety of uses. Imagine a certificate as being very similar to a passport, and indeed in some environments they have been called digital passports. Like a passport, a certificate has the following characteristics. You need to provide proof to the producer of the certificate that you are who you claim to be. It contains details of the issuing authority. It includes identity information. It includes a validity period, i.e. start and end dates. So now we have a certificate, but what next? Remember that a digital certificate is fundamentally a digitally signed public key, the signature of which is generated by the certificate authority, using their own private key. Therefore, to validate the authenticity of the digital signature, one uses the authority's public key. However, like a user's public key, this is also contained within the certificate. This is what we call the trusted certificate. Let us run through the process so that it is clear. The scenario we will go through is based on Alice wishing to send Bob a digitally signed message. So the processing is as follows. Bob obtains the CA's public key in the form of the CA's trusted certificate. Alice digitally signs a message that she wishes to send to Bob using her public key. She sends Bob the message, the digital signature of the message, and also her public certificate, which, as we know, is mathematically linked to the private key used to sign the message. On receipt, the first thing Bob will do is verify that Alice's certificate is truly authentic and has been issued by the CA, which Alice and Bob both trust. What Bob will then do is use the public key from the trusted certificate to validate the digital signature of Alice's certificate. Because of this, Bob will know that the public key in Alice's certificate is valid. Having validated Alice's public key, Bob will then use it to validate the digital signature in the message. If the digital signature is verified, then Bob knows the message came from Alice and it has not been modified. The trust model in this case is that Alice and Bob now trust each other, but this is established via the certificate authority. In effect, a two-way trust has now been established. Other trust models are possible, but these are outside the scope of this course. There is one other point to raise, whilst we are on the subject of certificate verification, that of revocation mechanisms. If for some reason Alice's private key is compromised, we need to find a way to indicate to consumers of Alice's certificate that it is no longer valid and should not be trusted. The most common mechanism is the publishing of certificate revocation lists, that's CRLs. A CRL is basically a list of certificate serial numbers that have been revoked. When Bob is verifying Alice's certificate, he will determine whether Alice's certificate is listed in a CRL, and if it is, he won't trust it. CRLs are published by the CAs.